Hello everyone, thank you so much for having me today. My name is Adriana Villela, and today I'm going to be talking to you about scaling with ephemeral pipelines. But before we get into that, a little bit about me. I'm a rock climber. I've been doing it since about 2002. I love it so much, I actually go twice a week with my family. Now, one of the things that I like the most about rock climbing is that climbing is all about solving interesting problems. So bouldering, which is the type of climbing that I do, the goal is to obviously get to the top of the wall. But on top of that, there's no rope attached to you. So we need to get to the top of the wall without falling. Now sometimes, as you try to get to the top of the wall, it may involve falling. You might hurt yourself. I actually sprained my ankle in March. I was on crutches for 2 weeks. But that didn't stop me. After 2 months, I got back into climbing once again. The thing about falling when you're climbing is that each time you get back on the wall, you learn something new about the problem that you're trying to solve. So you take that little extra bit of information with you, and that makes you more well-informed so that eventually you make it up to the top. Now, speaking of solving interesting problems, let me tell you about my day job. So by day, I work for BMO as a DevOps practices and standards lead, and in the true spirit of solving interesting problems, one of the problems that my team and I are solving is about solving DevOps at the enterprise level, which can be quite tricky. Now, before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the DevOps promise. So in a nutshell, the DevOps promise tells us that we're supposed to deliver faster and deliver safely. However, when we add the extra dimension of enterprise DevOps, it means that we're dealing with compliance, security, and scale. So from a compliance standpoint, it means we need to keep our regulators happy. From a security standpoint, well, you've got your money, so you better be secure. And finally, from a scaling standpoint, well, we've got 1,500 applications, thousands of developers across multiple continents. So how is it that we scale DevOps in an enterprise? And before we answer that question, let's look at the software delivery lifecycle. So in a relatively small organization, when we're delivering software, we do the usual thing of we're managing, we are configuring, planning, creating, verifying, securing, packaging, and finally releasing. Now, when we add a DevOps CI/CD pipeline to it, we can cover that automation in the blue part in the diagram over here. And that is supported by a number of DevOps tools. Now at my organization, you can see these are some of the tools that we use, but you can replace some of the tools like Confluence, you can replace it with GitHub Pages. Bitbucket can easily be GitHub or GitLab. Bamboo could be Circle CI or Jenkins. Artifactory could be Nexus. OpenShift could be EKS or AKS. And then all of that is supported by our DevOps CI/CD practices. Now, in a smaller organization, creating pipelines is a slightly simpler problem to solve because you can just hire one person or a small team of people to manually create pipelines for you. And that can be, it's probably not a very daunting task, and it's fairly easy to maintain. However, if you were to do the same thing in a larger organization, imagine you're creating a bunch of manual pipelines in a large organization with thousands of applications, thousands of developers across multiple continents. And all of a sudden, you've got duplication of work, you've got maintenance nightmares, you've got automation sprawl. And so all of a sudden, you're faced with this, where you've got a bunch of little tiny DevOps kingdoms, which makes every day feel a little bit like a struggle, like you're ice skating uphill or climbing up a mountain. And now, if we think back to our DevOps promise of delivering code fast and safely, what was happening was we weren't meeting that promise, we were failing at that promise. And so it led to this. It hurt. Now, as a result of that, it forced my team and me to take a step back and think, okay, what do we need to do differently? Because, okay, we've got the automation in place. We've got all these funky tools, but why is it that we are not fulfilling our DevOps promise? And the solution that we came up with was ephemeral pipelines. So you might be wondering, okay, what's an ephemeral pipeline? So in a nutshell, ephemeral pipeline enables dynamic configuration of compliant and secure pipelines, enables dynamic deployment of pipeline as code, dynamic upgrade of pipeline with new capabilities when they become available, dynamic destruction of the pipelines on project end. As corporations, we work not on a product level, but on a project level. We have dynamic destruction of pipelines, we have sharing of best practices as code across multiple teams. Now, the best part of this is we can create hundreds of pipelines in minutes. In fact, it can be in less than 10 minutes. So how do these ephemeral pipelines solve our problems? Well, first of all, we automatically create those pipelines. Remember, in our smaller organization, we could get away with creating these manual pipelines, but in a large organization, we have to be able to create them in a repeatable manner. So as soon as we automate that pipeline creation, we have that. They're fast. Remember, we can create hundreds of pipelines in less than 10 minutes. And lastly, we can share these pipelines easily. We are honoring DevOps by basically defining our pipelines as code. And because we are codifying things, it means that we can share our patterns and our best practices in code. So if we have a team that comes to us and say, hey, I figured out a cool way of integrating SonarQube into your pipeline, we can codify that, and then we can share that with other teams who are using our pipeline. So this slide describes a summary of the current capabilities that we have in our ephemeral pipelines. So first off, we've got some coding patterns that we put in place. We support Git flow and GitHub flow. And in particular, we put in some checks and balances, guardrails, if you will, to make sure that developers don't do stupid things. So for example, in Bitbucket, you can actually accidentally delete your develop and your master branches. So we put in some checks and balances to prevent you from deleting these by accident. We've also set up our repos so that when you merge into master and develop, you're forced to do a pull request. Again, we don't want people doing things without another pair of eyes looking at what we're doing. We've developed a number of build patterns, so we support Java build patterns specifically for Maven and Gradle. We've got build patterns supporting Python, Angular, and Node, and we've got build patterns for building Docker files. In terms of binary management, what we've done is we use Artifactory, and we've separated it out so that everyone has a snapshots repo, a release candidates repo, and a releases repo. And again, we're honoring DevOps principles by basically saying, okay, we're building once and deploying multiple times. So basically, whenever somebody integrates into the develop branch, it'll build your code, create your package, and publish into your snapshots repo in Artifactory. Once you're ready to go to QA, your dev lead will then take that package that's QA ready and will promote it to the snapshots repo. And that package can be deployed to your QA environment. And then finally, once your QA is done, you think, okay, you're ready for prod, then your QA lead will promote that package from release candidates to release, knowing that this package is prod ready. Whenever you decide your prod day is, it'll be good to go. From a deployment standpoint, what we've done is we've automated the bootstrapping of our OpenShift environment. And that means basically automating the creation of OpenShift projects and creation of OpenShift objects. So we create things like image streams, build configs, deployment configs, services, secrets, config maps, all in a standardized way. Because, I mean, if you try to create all this stuff using the YAML templates in OpenShift, you'll want to pull your hairs out. So we made it nice and simple for you. And finally, the part that we're working on next is automated compliance, traceability, and reporting. And so the idea here is we basically populate your build.info file as you create your pipeline, so you have that traceability as your code moves through the pipeline. And we also, at the end, when you're ready to push your code to production, we have basically release notes that are automatically published to Confluence for you. So now all of this, what we wanted to do is help you define your pipeline in as simple a manner as possible. So we have 4 magical YAML files that enable this to happen. So first, we have our profile.yaml, which basically defines your project, contains the project metadata, and your tooling definitions. Then we have our secrets.yaml.gpg, where we store our pipeline secrets, and it's GPG encrypted because we don't want any clear text passwords in our Bitbucket repos, because that's bad, and info security will run after us if we do that. Build.yaml is a file that basically is used to define our Bamboo build plans as YAML, and one of the cool things that we did internally is Bamboo has a Java API for defining your builds as code, and they also have a simple YAML API for doing the same, but the YAML API is very simplistic, so we actually wrote a wrapper around the Java API so that you can define your Bamboo builds as YAML, so it's way cooler than what Atlassian gives you, FYI. And then finally, we've got our app compose.yaml, which basically does all your OpenShift definitions, and that's the file that's read for all your OpenShift bootstrapping. And so we put a lot of the patterns in place for you so you don't have to navigate those heinous, long OpenShift template YAML files. So once we have all these files defined, then we can create our pipelines with a simple command. And likewise, we can tear down our pipelines with a simple command. And because it's all defined as code, we can do it as many times as we want with the confidence that you can create and tear down your pipeline, knowing that you're going to be creating the same pipeline the same way every time, as long as you keep your code the same. And because it's codified, that means that if Joe decides to change your pipeline definitions and it breaks stuff, then you can yell at Joe for it. So that's basically the nature of ephemeral pipelines. Now, this next slide, I'm going to touch upon it briefly. I will say this. This slide talks about our enterprise release forking, which is something cool that we came up with in lieu of enterprise release trains. I'm not going to go into detail on it here, but if you have questions about it during the Q&A, I'm more than happy to go over it in detail. And finally, I want to give a special shout out to my super awesome team. This work that we've done wouldn't have been possible without any of these folks on the team. We are a team of highly skilled software engineers with deep DevOps knowledge. I feel like we're always learning every day. I mean, my knowledge of DevOps continues to improve every day that I come to work, and it's been super exciting. DevOps is my life. I feel like it's been my calling in my career, so I'm super excited to be part of this. So just want to give a shout out to my team. And I want to thank you for your time this evening. Here's my contact info if you want to reach out to me. Contact me on Twitter, LinkedIn, email to have a chat about DevOps. And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. And I'm also going to invite my partner in crime, Bernard, to help out with the Q&A. Thank you very much. Sorry?
How long did it take you to put this structure together?
Well,
when did you start?
It's been a journey. So we started, like 3.5 years ago. And the interesting thing about it is I feel like the first couple of years were basically all about just understanding the landscape in the organization. We're doing a lot of like piecemeal work, going to different teams, discovering different things about how the organization worked. And it wasn't until like around last year in like March that we finally had that full picture of how things worked in the organization. And we realized that we kept repeating ourselves in terms of what we were telling different teams to do for different DevOps patterns and best practices. And we thought, well, that's stupid. Like, why don't we just codify this? And so once we had that, then we started coding. So it's been about a year of coding. So, and it's been evolving pretty much ever since. And Bernard might want to say some extra stuff.
So I think one of the things was that I basically came from a startup culture and then went to the bank and wasn't saying anything whatever. But then one of the things we found out quite quickly was that the documents and all the cool things you read about DevOps are places like Google and Facebook and Instagram and stuff. does not apply at all. Like you literally have to change the organization structure itself to make that happen. And I'm not the CEO of BMO, so I can't flatten the organization. But what we thought we could do, which was the cool part about DevOps, was that we had code, and basically we had all these cool tools, and we didn't get Kubernetes, we got OpenShift, but it's good. So basically, the way that this thing works is basically we could spin up containers that do compliance on a large scale. We're talking about a lot of teams, a lot of vendors. So that's basically the way our pipeline works. So I think we're using the term pipeline as code a lot. What I want you to think about it is not the little Circle CI build structure that it actually builds. This is basically the API code into whether it's Circle CI or it's Jenkins. So it actually developed, that's where it comes from. So it's very as basic code as it is. So that means we can spin out any type of build system that you want. And it also secures us, because the other problem the bank has is that currently they might be doing Bamboo as their build agent, but tomorrow they might move to Jenkins, they might move to GitLab, and this insulates teams from having to change for no reason. We can just basically have a translator that translates whatever is in the build.yaml to any other system. So it's a high abstraction on it, and it seems to solve the problem well. So we can bootstrap any environment, any build at a go, and it saves tons of money, and it's quite scalable.
Okay, so kind of stole my question, but yeah, so I'm sure BMO has like a lot of independent teams that like at the end of the day really don't have much to do with each other other than it's all under the umbrella of BMO. How like are these teams able to be autonomous and like decide their own tools? You mentioned that you're at like specific standard builds for different types of applications. What happens when someone wants to deviate from that?
So what we found out was that the issue was not, and that was the big thing we fought against, because teams wanted some autonomy in terms of what they build. And that's not what we're saying to them. What we meant to them, or what we're saying specifically, was that let's say you basically want to design a particular build system. Our job is to make sure that build system, or whatever it is, delivers, it's faster, it's safer, there's compliance rules. And most of those teams, the issue was that they didn't know what those compliance rules were. They just wanted to put something together. So what we did is just provide a scaffold of what it should be. And then it would allow you to develop what you want to develop. But in a large organization such as BMO, what you are probably doing is being repeated by somebody in the UK or in the States. And so then the case was that then do it as code, so that if somebody wanted to build off your idea, then we can share it across, rather than they having them to contact you and take your time for more valuable work. So that's the difference in terms of how we set it up. Your work is code, it's a pattern that it works really well, it's helping your team, but then we need to distribute that working idea across the entire bank quite quickly, because you solve the problem nobody solved. So that's basically the concept that goes with it. And we don't stop anybody from doing it, we just wanted in code, having a place that people can just have access to that and use that as well. So we're not repeating ourselves.
We do have a centralized tool stack, so that helps. That was one of the initiatives, like when we started, that everyone in the organization is using that same tool stack. So then it made it a lot easier for us to develop this pipeline as code, knowing that everyone's using the same tools.
Thanks for the presentation. I was wondering, how do you foster Dutch, and how did you get all of the teams, since there are a lot of very probably distributed teams all over the place, to follow your standards and using the pipelines, or like the Ephemeral pipelines that you have set up?
So I would say that our job is part-time developer, part-time marketer. So we actually launched a huge internal campaign in the organization. So we use Yammer, for example, internally, and we use Confluence. And I thought, okay, well, Confluence has a blogging feature, so I'll just pump out a bunch of different blog posts. So my whole team and I, we would pump out different blog posts promoting DevOps, the merits of it. Why do you care? Why does it help you? and at the same time cross-posting on Yammer. And it was kind of cool because last year, like Bernard and I went on a couple of road shows across Canada and the US, and we had like a little booth promoting DevOps, and people would come up to us and say, hey, recognize you from your Yammer post. So we're actually getting people really into it, and we hosted like some internal lunch and learn. So we buy Teams pizza and talk to them about DevOps. And luckily, there are also some tech-minded executives high up that saw the value in what they were doing, what we were doing, and decided, okay, you know what, let's include this stuff as part of our mandate for the year and make it part of our deliverables to help accelerate our delivery.
And also, I think we strongly believe that if we're delivering faster, there's no argument to that, right? We can bootstrap, not only all the settings for your Git repo, we can bootstrap your entire environment for build, and then we can bootstrap your entire environment in less than a second. I mean, you could choose the manual way, that's, or choose what to make it and cover that. So, yeah, we wanted to win the argument both on merit and speed and safety and compliance, rather than, it being another enterprise, just another enterprise mandate. And so far we're winning and having people come on board. So that's pretty cool.
Thanks for the presentation. I have a question. How did you solve the problem of versioning in CI/CD world so that it's semantic but not that manual at the same time?
So one of the things, our biggest problem was that a bunch of users were using timestamps, and in a large enterprise. So when we say deployment, and I think that goes for any probably large enterprise or banks, we're talking about one deployment is multi-teams, multi-applications. So they just don't deploy just one app, they're deploying all the way till the mainframe, all in terms of the stack. And the biggest hack, which was the best success story for them, was not even the technical stuff, it's basically agreeing to do semantic versioning. And that's the key thing. So we intentionally put rules in the builds that, especially when it comes to, because we use Artifactory, so if you build something that's the same thing, Artifactory will reject it, it will break a build. So some things we don't want things to get past that, right? So that encourages semantic versioning. So some things we don't renegotiate around it. It's easy to go to production and say my application is 3.3.5 rather than my application is my app 2019, God knows when, right? It creates a lot of mistakes. Deployment in the bank is really costly, and just that timestamp, because somebody just got that wrong, could just stop an entire deployment. And so some of these things are becoming much more apparent to them. So most enterprises mirror ecosystems of small organizations, and we all know how semantic versioning has helped us do great work. So that's basically some other things. So some things are just basic rules you can get past to encourage the correct habit, and you get that feedback more quickly. So those are the things, like it includes tagging, and it also allows us to get compliance things just around what exactly what you're doing. So semantic versioning for the enterprise is a whole level of religion, especially if you're using our platform to do your work.
Is there a tool that you're using for versioning?
So we just use basically a pump script. Yeah. And basically, like for Maven builds, for example, we disable we disable and discourage the use of snapshots when you're naming your packages, because we want you to stick with semantic versioning from start to finish, because basically the stuff that's in your snapshots repo is going to be the stuff that ends up getting promoted to your release candidates. So, and that just, again, puts in some checks and balances to ensure that people are following those rules.
Just have two questions. You open source your solution, and every team takes their Snowflake. What sorts of challenges have you had implementing a user solution?
So in terms of open sourcing it, believe it or not, we've spoken to leadership, because open source in a bank They're not where we are at for most of you, whereby so we have to go through a whole bunch of different channels to get approval for it. So we are working aggressively on getting this open source because it's pretty simple in terms of how it works. Because of how it really works well, we are even thinking that with us moving to cloud, especially KS, no developer has to stop doing their work, just that it deploys somewhere else, right? So we abstract all of that, but we are trying desperately to get the enterprise to understand the value of open sourcing and also letting them know that we're not revealing any account passwords in it because it's not in it, but we are working on it and hopefully we can get it. We'll post it on the Slack channel if we get that, if it for us.
What was the other part of your question?
I was just wondering, a lot of teams tend to think that they're just a snowflake, and how do you convince them that they can, that they should use this solution?
Well, we think that the snowflake idea has to meet a particular outcome. So if you're snowflake and you're getting builds from minutes to seconds, that's a good snowflake. Everybody can, let it snow on all of us, right? It has to provide a good outcome. So instead of having a debate about how unique your stuff is, the question is it better? And if it's better, we will throw everything out and do what you're doing. But I mean, we can't say in 2019 how you build your Java, JavaScript, Ruby is fundamentally different. You're reinventing the wheel on it. That cannot be true unless you have something in it that makes it faster. And that is not an application. That's not a pipeline concern. Usually it's an application concern. So the snowflake theory is only as good as you've done some special specs about the way you zip your file or the way you basically package it. You cannot, unless you rewrite zip or rewrite the hard compressors in a better way, right? So usually the way we deal with it is, again, very respectfully, just proves that you can have a better time. And if you have a better time in your build, then we all adapt it. Just wait that with providing something that meets the character metrics.
I would also add that, sometimes it's really tough, like when we come to a team and say, hey, like, we've got this thing to create an automated pipeline. They're like, but we already have a pipeline, so why should I use this? And really the compelling reason is, well, first of all, we can codify your pipeline. So if someone leaves your team, that knowledge doesn't leave with them, right? It's in your Bitbucket repo. And secondly, it basically ensures that you can recreate that pipeline anytime you want. So it does become an exercise in logic. Sometimes it involves convincing multiple people on the team, and sometimes it's a battle that you lose. Sometimes it's a battle that you win. At the end of the day, we go for the FOMO approach. We have enough people using our pipeline as code. The teams that are a little bit skeptical will go, oh, that looks really cool. I think I want it, and they'll start using it. And for those who want it, then it's awesome, and they'll continue to support us. For those who don't, you can't force somebody to change if they don't want to change. So.
Last question? Last question.
That'll be too exclusive. So I actually have a question for scale so that we can put it in context. How many teams, how many projects, I don't know, just give us context. What's the scale?
So I would say that so our current project affects the sizes. We're talking about something on it. So we call it most. I'm just trying to see what's legal to say about English to say. We have, so you can imagine that a CIO area would be the size of at least you have for one team 300 people just on one stack, and we're working on 6 stacks. And each of these 6 stacks, they have concurrent projects. So within a particular, as they go, you're going to have multiple pipelines generated just for that stack. So it's quite massive. So call it a startup, a mini startup in the organization itself. So we are focused on that particular area in Vivo. So all the front end stack, mobile, all the apps you see when you go to the interface, all the way down, that's basically the scale we're looking at.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.